welcome people from St. Francis of Assisi Parish in Bakersfield. So we're on the Gospel of Mark, we're on the Passion narratives. We're at the point now where he has been captured, and now he's going to be examined by the Sanhedrin. Now, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's a very clear conciliar examination by the eldership of Israel. That is not found in John's Gospel. John's Gospel has an interrogation by Annas, the former high priest, and father-in-law of Caiaphas, the present high priest. There's no Sanhedrin council testimony in the Gospel of John. However, in the synoptic tradition of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's a very clear objective about how we are going to deal with Jesus. So we have Jesus before the Sanhedrin, and this is Mark chapter 14, 53 to 72. So after everyone deserts Jesus, and the identity of Jesus is pointed out by Judas Iscariot. Again, it's dark. They come with clubs, lanterns, and torches to make sure that they got the right man. Okay? So they then dragged Jesus to the Sanhedrin. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and elders and the scribes were assembled. This is the full assembly of the Sanhedrin. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself with the fire. Verse 55. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. So Mark is saying, even though they had plotted to do away with Jesus, you have to have evidence. You have to have empirical evidence to indicate that he's a blasphemer, or he disregards the Torah, or somehow makes fun of the Torah, or gives a teaching contrary to the general interpretation of Torah stipulations. And so what you have, there were the many issues that Jesus and the Pharisees had difficulty with. Okay. First of all, in his own authority, Jesus cast out sin. Jesus forgave sin. Well, in the Old Testament, only God forgives sin. So this is blasphemy. And that happened early on in Mark's Gospel. The issue of Sabbath law. Shall we pluck grain on the Sabbath? Shall we work on the Sabbath? Also, shall we heal on the Sabbath? You could not, on the Sabbath law, you could not create, you could not produce, you could not transform. Well, if you have a non-medicinal healing on the Sabbath, that is to say, there's a healing that Jesus does without the use of any type of medicine, but he simply cures by the activity and the efficacy of his voice, of his word, and there's an instantaneous cure. Well, so he's cured, okay? Then the issue of kosher. What goes into you can defile you. Jesus changes that. So there's moral kosher, namely strict adherence to the Torah and the 10 commandments and the 613 mitzvahs contained within the 5 books of the Torah. And then there's ritualistic Torah, what you can taste, touch, and handle, and what you cannot taste, touch, and handle. Jesus does away with ritualistic kosher. This is a mark of identity for the Jew. We're not Gentiles. We don't dress like Gentiles. We don't eat like Gentiles. We don't treat each other like Gentiles. So the presupposition here was external reality, created external reality by God. Some of that which God has created can be arch defiling. Jesus says no. There's nothing going into you that can defile you, because it doesn't enter the heart where the Torah is. It enters the stomach and then passes out to the sewer. This would have gotten Jesus into a lot of trouble. Again, you're dealing with a mark of authority. You're dealing with a mark of identity. We are Jews because we act this way. Kosher was a way of differentiating the Gentile from Jew, okay? And he's taking away some of the symbols of self-identification. Just like the Sabbath. The Gentiles did not have Sabbaths. The Jews did, so you may not work one day a week. And one day a week, you are to dedicate it to God alone. Well, that was foreign at the time of the Gentile imperium. No. But did you see, this is a mark of identification. And one by one, Jesus is clearing the deck. Then there is the temple issue. In John's gospel, he cleanses the temple right at the beginning of his messianic mission. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke is at the end. And this is the last straw. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. This is it. He and his followers overtake the temple treasury. Because again, you had to have the exchange of money. Gentile money would have the image of the emperor, who's a god or some deity. Well, that couldn't go into sacred space. So you had the money changers, and they had to be there. So you exchange the money, Gentile money, into Jewish coinage or Jewish liturgical money. And then with that money, you'd buy the commodities offered up in sacrifice. Okay, so the money changers and the merchant that sold pigeons and vegetation and all the rest had to be there. And that which was offered up had to be without any imperfection, without any form of defilement. So the fruits and vegetables, the cereal offerings, the animals, the goats, the sheep, the bulls, whatever that was being offered up in sacrifice had to be without blemish. And that meant that obviously to have certain commodities without any imperfection, that would have cost more. So some scholars say the reason why Jesus is so angry is that you are cheating the Father. You are selling animals or things offered up in sacrifice that were less than. They were contaminated or in some way defective. And so that's why Jesus says, you have taken my Father's house and you turned it into a den of thieves. You are cheating God by charging exorbitant amounts. So the violation of the virtue of justice, give me that which is due to me by contract. And so the covenant is that you will only offer to God the most pristine offering. And now you're charging an exorbitant amount of money. And so you're cheating the person that's buying the commodity to be offered up in prayer, and you're cheating God. Well, Jesus will have nothing to do with this. So he overturns the tables of the money changers. And we've all seen the Jesus type pictures where he overturns a few tables. No. This is the temple treasury. It's portico after portico of rooms, okay? And so that meant this is an armed takeover. He could not have done it by himself. This I've said in a earlier broadcast. This was an armed takeover. And to the point that he prohibited the buying and selling. He did not allow access to the temple. I never heard of such a thing. He technically stopped for a length of time the sacrificial liturgical activity of Israel. He prohibited people from entering into the temple precincts in order to buy things to offer up in sacrifice, which was a very bold move, to say the least. It's only in the afternoon that he will relinquish his time at the temple and then leaves. These are the things that would have gotten him into all sorts of difficulty. So he's now facing the Sanhedrin. Okay, so what are the charges? First of all, you have to understand something. Israel is under Roman occupation. So Roman law is the law of the land as well as Jewish law. But Jewish law or Torah law is subject to Roman law because Israel is a vassal state, okay, under the Roman Imperium. So, do the Romans care about mitzvot or stipulations contained within the Torah? So they got to figure out how they are going to arrest Jesus and what are the charges, because he's going to have to go to the Sanhedrin, then present it to Pilate and Herod, and Pilate represents the Roman Imperium. The only thing that Pilate wants to know is he treasonable? Has he done something contrary to the Roman state? Is he jeopardizing Roman Imperium law in the land of Israel? That's all they care about. Is Pilate, no, this is John's gospel, Pilate doesn't care about Jewish law. Is he breaking Roman law, yes or no? That's the issue. And now, before we get to that point, he has to go to the Sanhedrin. And they got to find him guilty on something. The problem is the data is conflictual. They don't have enough evidence. Whatever that means, they didn't have enough evidence. So let's look at the text. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus that they might put him to death, but they found none. Like, couldn't you get your ducks in a row? Could you get the data ready? You had months to figure out a plan. For many gave false testimony against him, and the testimony did not agree. Well, can't you find the proper motivation that would be consistent to the point that we can say there is a violation of Torah or some rabbinical law that would in fact be enough to execute Jesus? They couldn't even do that right. So some stood up and gave false testimony, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy the temple. This is John chapter 2. Okay. I will destroy the temple. He never said that. He's talking about the temple of his body, not the physicality of the temple in Jerusalem. They misunderstood his teaching. This is very clear in John chapter 2. So obviously that tradition later written about it in John was well known by Mark. And that the text would read, we heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands. He's talking about the temple of his body. They misunderstood what he was saying. They couldn't get it right. But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. They can't get their act together. You have conflicting testimony. Either it's false testimony or it's a misunderstanding of the actual text or the actual teaching that Jesus gave. Then the high priest stood up, this is Mark, before them all and asked Jesus, have you no answer? what is it that they testify against you? But he was silent and did not answer. Okay, now you have to ask, well, why didn't he? He said everything that he was going to say. This is the time in which it's over. You know very well what I've been teaching. And yet the high priest, in order to be just, has to ask them questions because they have to have testimony, genuine empirical testimony that is so construed as to indicate a violation of Torah law to the point that execution is necessary. Capital punishment can be enforced. Now, again, as I said in an earlier broadcast, some governors in the land of Judea gave the Sanhedrin a blanket permission to execute or to use capital punishment as the final answer to some law-breaking activity. In this particular case, the blanket permission has not been given. Okay, and this we get from outside sources, from non-canonical, non-biblical sources. We get further outside information that, okay, certain governors gave a blanket permission, others did not. Well, this is the time in which there was no blanket permission, so they had to go to Pilate. Okay, so at this particular juncture, what do we have? Have you no answer? Notice Jesus is in charge of his fate, not the high priest. Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you? Because you're going to lie anyway. Again, false testimony. Jeez. But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus says, ego eimi, I am. Now, you got to understand terms here. Terms are not univocal. They don't have the same definitional structure. Let's look at, now Mark has Jesus saying, ego eimi, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power, God, and coming with the clouds of heaven. In Matthew, then the high priest said to him, I put you under oath. This is a formal precept. I adjure you by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, you have said so. The title that you have just given to me, which you don't believe that I am that title. I am the Messiah. You have said so. And then Matthew has, like Mark, but I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. What does Luke have to say? They said, if you are the Messiah, tell us. He replied, if I tell you, you will not believe. And if I question you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. This is Daniel 7:14. And all of them asked, are you the Son of God? He said, you say that I am. Then they said, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it from his own lips. Let's go through this. Messiah. The Messiah means one who has been anointed king of Israel. So the Messiah, or the messianic expectation at Jesus, that the Messiah would be an actual political, social, empirical king that came from God, that would rout out the Roman Imperium or rout out the enemies of Israel, And he as God's viceroy, he as God's goel, God's vindicator, God's representative, as one who's been anointed king of Israel. See, and also Messiah also means, at first usage, centuries before, I mean, one who's been anointed without the kingship. Later, due to theological and social political development of the idea of the Messiah and the royal kingship of Israel, the Messiah was one who's been anointed, not just anointed, but also king of Israel. So there's a change in meaning. Okay, this is very important. So the Jews at the time of Jesus had a very clear messianic expectation that the Messiah would be an actual empirical king that would rule Israel and would rout out the enemies of Israel. Israel is a theocracy. Social political leaders are also religious leaders. So the high priest was a social, political, religious leader. The king of Israel was king, obviously, social, political ruler, but with the mandate from God to be God's advocate, God's representative to his own people. Okay, so the term Messiah means one who's been anointed king. The Messiah also had other titles. Son of David. The Messiah would come from the lineage and heritage of King David. Had to be born in Bethlehem. So the Messiah would be in the line of King David. So he would be a son of David. The Messiah would be a son of God. This is a very important title. It's not univocal. There's multiple definitional structures of the term son of God. On one level, the term son of God meant that you had a moral union with God himself. So if God is merciful and just, and you are merciful and just, you are like God, image and likeness. So you are a son of God by way of moral union, by way of moral union. Your identification comes from the fact that you see God and his word as the ultimate good, because morality deals with that which is good, okay? So there is a moral relationship, not a divine one. So the Son of God, 5 definitional structures. Any Jew that was observant of Torah was a son of God by way of moral union. The prophets, insofar as they articulated faithfully what God asked them to prophesy or to say or to speak or to teach, they were sons of God. The king of Israel, when he was faithful to God and executed the mitzvot of the Torah in a just way, he was a son of God. Okay. Angels, insofar as they did exactly what God commanded them to do, were sons of God. The Messiah was to have been a son of God. Union. So in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, whenever Jesus talks about the Son of God, it's by way of moral union. In John's gospel, there's only one Son of God, not by moral union, but by divine nature. The Son of God in John's gospel resides in the bosom of God himself, and therefore no one has ever seen God except his only Son, who resides in, again, the imagery, the bosom of God, the identification, the very destiny, the very purpose, the very nature of something is in the heart. So that's where the Son of God resides in John's gospel. So in John's gospel is not a son by moral union, but by divine nature. Get that straight. Okay? Now we go back to Mark's gospel. Even though in the synoptic tradition, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Son of God has multiple definitions, and they all deal with a moral union. There's one exception: the trial of Jesus at the Sanhedrin. In Mark's gospel, when the high priest says, "Are you the Son of the Blessed One? Are you the Messiah?" Jesus answered, "Ego eimi, I am." Why is that important? He's using the divine name for self-identification. In Exodus chapter 3, when Moses has a face-to-face encounter with God that's seen through the burning bush, and God, or the angel of God, and God, because it's simultaneous, read the text. If I go back to Egypt and tell the children of Israel, "Who sent me?" Who shall I say sent me? What is your name, God? Heye Eshe Heye, I am who I am, or simply I am. It means self-existence. Create pure existence without any of quality. He always was. I am self-existing. I always was and always will be. I am existent in and of itself. That is my name. That means divine nature. That's how Moses understands God's identity. I am who I am. And that can mean I am present to you. I will be for you whatever tomorrow demands. You know, so there's transliterations of the I am who I am.